Every morning, before the world tells you who to be, you must decide who you are. Because the most powerful voice you will hear all day is not the news, not your boss, not social media. It is the voice in your own head. And if you don't train that voice, it will default to fear, doubt, and past limitations. So the first thing you tell yourself is this: I am responsible for my life. Not my parents, not my past, not the economy. Responsibility is not a burden, it is freedom. The moment you accept that you are responsible, you reclaim the power to change. The second thing you tell yourself is, I have a purpose bigger than my comfort. Life is not meant to be easy. It is meant to be meaningful. When you connect your actions to a cause greater than yourself, discipline becomes natural. You stop asking, what do I feel like doing? And start asking, what does my purpose require of me today? Third, remind yourself daily, I can do hard things. Growth has never lived inside comfort. Every meaningful transformation in your life has required discomfort, uncertainty, and courage. Pain is not punishment, it is preparation. When you stop resisting difficulty and start using it, you become unshakable. Fourth, tell yourself, progress, not perfection, is the goal. Perfection is fear in disguise. Progress is truth. Small, consistent actions, taken daily, compound into extraordinary results. You don't need to win the whole battle today. You just need to win this moment. Fifth, say this with conviction: what I focus on grows. Your mind is a fertile field. Whatever you plant, gratitude or resentment, faith or fear, will multiply. Train your focus deliberately. Look for lessons, not losses. Look for opportunities, not excuses. Sixth, remind yourself, I am not alone and I am guided. There is an intelligence greater than you that operates through discipline, integrity, and service. When your actions align with truth, life begins to cooperate. Trust is not passive, it is active obedience to what you know is right. Seventh, tell yourself, I choose courage over comfort. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision that something else matters more. Speak when it's easier to stay silent. Act when it's safer to wait. This is how leaders are forged. Eighth, affirm this daily: I am becoming, not stuck. You are not your past decisions. You are not your worst mistakes. You are a work in progress, refining your character through every challenge. Identity is not fixed. It is built through daily choices. Ninth, say this with humility and strength: I am here to serve, not just to succeed. Success without service is empty. Fulfillment comes when your growth helps others grow, when your strength becomes someone else's safety, when your journey lights the way for those behind you. And finally, tell yourself this every single day: today matters. Not yesterday, not someday, today. This moment is where discipline lives. This moment is where faith acts. This moment is where destiny is shaped. When you tell yourself these things daily, you don't just change your mindset, you change your standards. And when your standards rise, your life must follow. Identity is the invisible force that governs every decision you make, even the ones you believe are purely logical. Long before action shows up in your life, identity has already cast the deciding vote. What you consistently tell yourself about who you are becomes the lens through which you interpret challenges, opportunities, and even failure. If you believe you are someone who quits when things get hard, difficulty will feel like proof. If you believe you are someone who learns and adapts, the same difficulty becomes instruction. The words you repeat internally are not harmless thoughts. They are commands shaping your behavior. Every habit you have is loyal to an identity. People don't wake up and randomly act, they act in alignment with who they think they are. When someone says, I'm not disciplined, what they are really saying is, I have accepted an identity that excuses inconsistency. The mind will always work to protect identity, even if that identity is limiting. This is why change feels so uncomfortable at first. It threatens the familiar story you've been telling yourself for years. Growth demands an identity upgrade before it ever produces an external result. The most dangerous identities are the ones formed unconsciously. Childhood experiences, repeated failures, criticism, and comparison all leave marks that quietly become beliefs. Over time, those beliefs turn into labels. Not good enough, not smart enough, always late, bad with money, unlucky in relationships. Once a label is accepted, behavior follows to confirm it. This is not weakness. It is how the human brain seeks consistency. The problem is that consistency without truth becomes a prison. When you intentionally choose your identity, everything changes. Instead of asking, "What should I do?" you begin asking, "Who must I become?" This question shifts the focus from short-term motivation to long-term character. A person who identifies as disciplined doesn't rely on willpower. Discipline is simply what they do. A person who sees themselves as a learner doesn't fear mistakes. Mistakes become data. Identity removes friction, because behavior aligned with identity feels natural. Daily self-talk is the tool that reinforces or rewrites identity. The mind believes what it hears repeatedly, especially when it comes from you. This is why affirmations are not about pretending, they are about. At first, new language feels awkward because it challenges an old identity. But repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity creates belief. Over time, belief becomes automatic behavior. This is not positive thinking. It is psychological conditioning aligned with intention. Identity also determines how you respond under pressure. When stress hits, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your identity. In moments of fear, fatigue, or uncertainty, you default to who you believe you are. This is why preparation is not just skill-based, but identity-based. If you see yourself as resilient, pressure activates strength. If you see yourself as fragile, pressure confirms collapse. The situation doesn't decide the outcome, identity does. The most empowering truth is that identity is not fixed. You are not born with most of the labels you carry today, you absorb them. And what is learned can be unlearned. Every time you act in alignment with a new story, even in small ways, you cast a vote for a new identity. One honest conversation. One disciplined morning, one courageous decision. These moments are evidence, and evidence is what reshapes belief. Telling yourself who you are every day is not arrogance, it is leadership. If you don't define yourself, the world will do it for you, based on convenience, past performance, or other people's limitations. But when you consciously choose your identity, you stop reacting and start leading. You know. Wait for confidence to act. Action builds confidence because it confirms who you are becoming. Purpose is not a luxury reserved for the lucky or the enlightened. It is a necessity for anyone who wants endurance. Without purpose, effort feels heavy, discipline feels forced, and pain feels meaningless. The human mind can tolerate almost any difficulty when it understands why it must endure it. When that why is missing, even small obstacles feel overwhelming. Purpose does not remove struggle from life, but it gives struggle direction, and direction transforms suffering into growth. Comfort is seductive because it promises relief without effort, but it always comes at a hidden cost. When comfort becomes the goal, potential quietly shrinks. Purpose, on the other hand, asks something of you. It requires sacrifice, patience, and consistency. That is why it feels demanding. But this demand is not cruel, it is clarifying. Purpose filters decisions. It helps you say no to distractions, not because they are bad, but because they are misaligned. You stop chasing every opportunity and start committing to what truly matters. Many people wait for purpose to appear as a feeling, some dramatic moment of clarity. But purpose is not found, it is chosen. It is built through service, responsibility, and contribution. It grows stronger when you attach your actions to something that improves lives beyond your own. When your work, habits, and goals serve only your comfort, motivation fluctuates. When they serve a mission, motivation becomes secondary to commitment. Purpose also reframes pain. Without purpose, pain feels personal, unfair, and defeating. With purpose, pain becomes instructional. It asks, what is this preparing me for? Every meaningful calling demands a higher level of character, and character is shaped under resistance. Purpose doesn't mean you enjoy hardship, it means you understand it. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, who is this shaping me to become? When purpose is bigger than comfort, discipline stops feeling like punishment. Early mornings, delayed gratification, and difficult conversations no longer feel like sacrifices, they feel like investments. You begin to see time as sacred and energy as a resource to be spent wisely. Purpose creates a long-term lens that protects you from short-term impulses. You are no longer driven by moods, but guided by meaning. There will be seasons when purpose feels distant and progress feels slow. In those moments, comfort will call louder than commitment. This is where purpose must be remembered, not felt. Purpose is not an emotion, it is a principle. Emotions rise and fall, but principles anchor behavior. When you act in alignment with purpose despite discomfort, self-respect grows, and self-respect fuels resilience more powerfully than motivation ever could. Purpose also connects you to something timeless. When your life revolves only around personal success, every setback feels like a threat to your identity. But when your life is tied to service, growth, and contribution, setbacks become temporary delays, not permanent defeats. You realize you are part of something unfolding over time, something larger than a single win or loss. This perspective calms anxiety and strengthens resolve. Living with purpose does not mean rejecting joy or ease, it means earning them honestly. Comfort becomes a byproduct, not a goal. Rest becomes restoration, not escape. You enjoy life more deeply because your satisfaction is rooted in progress and impact, not indulgence. Purpose aligns the soul with action, creating a quiet confidence that doesn't need constant validation. Each day, when you remind yourself that your purpose is bigger than your comfort, you reclaim your direction. You choose meaning over convenience, contribution over applause, and growth over ease. And over time, that choice shapes not just what you do, but who you become. Responsibility is often misunderstood as pressure, but in truth, it is the greatest source of personal power available to any human being. The moment you take full ownership of your life, you step out of the role of victim and into the role of creator. Blame may feel comforting in the short term because it protects the ego, but it quietly robs you of influence. If someone else is responsible for your outcomes, then someone else controls your future. Responsibility restores that control to you. Most people resist responsibility because they associate it with guilt or shame. But responsibility is not about judging the past, it is about directing the future. You can acknowledge that something was unfair, painful, or unexpected without surrendering your agency. Life does not have to be fair for you to be effective. When you accept responsibility, you stop waiting for permission, validation, or rescue. You begin asking a different question. Not who caused this, but what can I do next? Blame is seductive because it simplifies reality. It reduces complex situations into convenient explanations: the system, the timing, other people, bad luck. While these factors may be real, focusing on them keeps you mentally stuck. Responsibility, by contrast, is complex and demanding. It forces you to look inward, to confront habits, decisions, and patterns that may be uncomfortable to admit. But within that discomfort lies clarity. Clarity creates choice, and choice creates freedom. When you take responsibility, your language changes. You stop saying "I can't" and start saying "I won't" or "I haven't yet." This shift is subtle but powerful. "I can't" implies helplessness. "I won't" implies values and priorities. It reminds you that you are making decisions every day, whether consciously or not. Responsibility turns unconscious reactions into conscious choices. Responsibility also builds self-trust. Each time you own your actions, especially when it would be easier to deflect, you strengthen your character. You learn that you can face consequences without collapsing. This creates resilience. You stop fearing mistakes because mistakes become feedback, not verdicts. A responsible person does not seek perfection. They seek progress and accountability. This mindset accelerates growth because it keeps learning alive. In leadership, responsibility is the difference between influence and authority. People do not follow titles, they follow ownership. When others see you take responsibility, especially in difficult moments, they feel safe, respected, and inspired. Responsibility creates credibility. It communicates that you are reliable, grounded, and willing to carry weight without resentment. This is how trust is built. In families, teams, and communities, on a personal level, responsibility transforms relationships. When you stop blaming others for how you feel and start owning your responses, conflict loses its power to control you. You can set boundaries without bitterness, communicate without defensiveness, and listen without needing to win. Responsibility does not mean accepting mistreatment. It means choosing how you respond with integrity. There is also a spiritual dimension to responsibility. When you recognize that you have been given agency, time, and potential, responsibility becomes stewardship. Your talents are not random, your opportunities are not accidental. Taking responsibility honors the gift of being alive and capable. It aligns action with conscience and effort with purpose. The paradox is that responsibility, though heavy at first, ultimately lightens the soul. Carrying blame, resentment, and excuses is exhausting. Owning your life simplifies it. You focus on what you can control and release what you cannot. This focus creates momentum, and momentum, once built, reinforces the belief that you are capable of shaping your future through consistent, intentional action. Consistency is the quiet force behind every meaningful transformation. It rarely gets the applause because it doesn't look dramatic, but it is far more reliable than bursts of motivation or intensity. Intensity feels powerful in the moment. It surges with emotion and ambition, but it fades just as quickly. Consistency, on the other hand, operates below the surface, shaping identity and results through repetition. What you do occasionally may impress others, but what you do consistently defines you. The mind often overestimates what can be achieved in a single day and underestimates what can be achieved over time. This is why people start strong and quit early. They rely on emotional fuel instead of systems. Consistency replaces emotion with structure. It removes the daily debate about whether or not to act because the decision has already been made. When an action becomes routine, it no longer drains willpower, it conserves it. Small actions, repeated daily, compound in ways that are difficult to perceive at first. The early stages of consistency often feel unrewarding because progress is subtle and invisible. This is where most people stop, not because the method doesn't work, but because the feedback is delayed. Consistency requires faith in the process before evidence appears. It asks you to trust that effort invested today is building something you may not see for weeks or months. Consistency also reshapes identity more effectively than intensity ever could. Anyone can act disciplined for a week. Few people act disciplined when no one is watching and nothing seems to be changing. Each time you show up despite low motivation, you reinforce the belief that you are reliable. That self-image becomes self-fulfilling. Over time, discipline stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like alignment with who you are. Intensity often leads to burnout because it demands too much, too fast. It ignores the rhythms of human energy and sustainability. Consistency respects those rhythms. It allows for rest without guilt and progress without exhaustion. A consistent approach is not about pushing harder. It is about showing up smarter. It prioritizes longevity over urgency and mastery over speed. When challenges arise, consist. NCY provides stability. In chaotic seasons, routines become anchors. They create a sense of control and predictability when external circumstances feel uncertain. Even small, consistent habits, like daily reflection, movement, or learning, can ground you. They remind you that while you may not control everything, you always control your next action. Consistency also cultivates patience, a trait essential for wisdom. In a world obsessed with instant results, patience is a competitive advantage. It allows you to remain calm while others rush, to refine while others chase, and to endure while others abandon their efforts. Patience born from consistency builds quiet confidence. You stop needing constant validation because you trust the trajectory you're on. There is also a moral strength in consistency. Keeping promises to yourself builds integrity. Each time you follow through, you reinforce self-respect. Each time you don't, you teach yourself that your word is negotiable. Consistency restores the weight of your commitments. It turns intention into character. Over time, consistency outperforms talent, luck, and motivation. Talent opens doors, but consistency keeps you in the room. Luck may create opportunity, but consistency prepares you to use it. Motivation may start the journey, but consistency finishes it. The results may arrive quietly, but they arrive with depth, stability, and permanence. Fear is often misunderstood as a warning that something is wrong, when in reality it is usually a signal that something important is happening. Fear shows up most strongly at the edge of growth, right before expansion, not before failure. If you examine your life honestly, the moments that shaped you most were preceded by fear, speaking up for the first time, walking away from what was familiar, committing to a path without guarantees. Fear did not appear because you were incapable. It appeared because you were stepping into the unknown. The mind is designed to protect, not to help you grow. Its primary function is survival, which means it prefers the familiar, even when the familiar is limiting. Fear is the language the mind uses to keep you within known boundaries. When you feel fear, it does not mean you are in danger, it means you are leaving certainty behind. Growth requires uncertainty, and uncertainty activates fear. This is not a flaw in your design, it is part of it. Many people treat fear as a command rather than information. They feel it and immediately stop, retreat, or rationalize inaction. Over time, this conditions the mind to associate fear with avoidance. The result is a shrinking life, safe, predictable, and quietly unfulfilled. When fear becomes a stop sign, potential remains locked away, not because it wasn't possible, but because it was never pursued. When fear is reframed as a signal of expansion, behavior changes. Instead of asking, how do I get rid of this fear? You begin asking, what is this fear pointing me toward? Fear often, glights what matters most. You don't fear what you don't care about. The presence of fear indicates investment, meaning, and possibility. It shows you where growth is available if you're willing to step forward. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move with fear present. This distinction is critical. Waiting to feel fearless is a form of procrastination disguised as patience. Confidence is built through action, not before it. Each time you act despite fear, you teach your nervous system that fear is survivable. Over time, fear loses its authority, not because it disappears, but because you no longer obey it blindly. Fear also sharpens awareness. When acknowledged rather than suppressed, it can increase focus and preparation. The key is not to let fear dictate outcomes, but to let it inform readiness. You can feel fear and still choose alignment with your values. In fact, acting in alignment while afraid builds integrity. It proves that your decisions are guided by principle, not impulse. There is a deeper cost to avoiding fear that often goes unnoticed: the regret of unrealized potential. The pain of fear is temporary, but the pain of regret compounds over time. What you avoid today becomes a question tomorrow: what if I had tried? Fear faced becomes experience. Fear avoided becomes doubt. One strengthens you, the other erodes confidence. Fear also has a spiritual dimension. Stepping into the unknown requires trust. Trust in your ability to adapt. Trust in timing. Trust that growth is meaningful even when outcomes are uncertain. When you move forward despite fear, you participate in that trust. You align action with faith rather than certainty. This alignment often leads to unexpected support, insight, and resilience that only appear once you take the step. Over time, your relationship with fear transforms. It no longer signals danger, it signals direction. You begin to recognize fear as a companion on the path of growth rather than an enemy to be defeated. And as you continue to move forward again and again, fear becomes less of a barrier and more of a marker, evidence that you are living beyond the limits of your former self. Gratitude is not a passive emotion or a polite response to favorable circumstances. It is an active discipline that shapes how the mind interprets reality. What you consistently focus on becomes your experience of life. When the mind is trained to notice what is missing, unfair, or delayed, it reinforces a sense of scarcity and frustration. Gratitude interrupts that pattern by deliberately directing attention toward what is present, working, and meaningful. This shift does not deny difficulty, it reframes it. The brain has a natural bias toward negativity. because it evolved to detect threats. While this bias once served survival, it now often fuels anxiety, comparison, and dissatisfaction. Gratitude counteracts this tendency by expanding awareness beyond problems. When you practice gratitude, you teach your brain to scan for resources instead of threats. Over time, this rewiring changes emotional responses, making resilience more accessible during stress. Gratitude also alters perception of progress. Without gratitude, progress feels invisible because attention remains fixed on what is still ahead. With gratitude, progress becomes visible because attention includes how far you've already come. This awareness builds momentum. People who feel they are progressing are more likely to persist, even when the road ahead is long. Gratitude, in this way, becomes fuel for endurance. There is a powerful connection between gratitude and abundance. Abundance is not about how much you have. It is about how you relate to what you have. When appreciation is present, resources feel sufficient, creativity expands, and generosity becomes natural. Scarcity thinking contracts the mind, making people protective and reactive. Gratitude opens the mind, making collaboration, patience, and trust more available. Opportunities often flow toward those who recognize value, rather than those who constantly chase more. Gratitude also strengthens emotional regulation. In moments of disappointment or frustration, the ability to recall what is still good prevents emotional spirals. This does not mean suppressing pain or pretending everything is fine. It means holding complexity, acknowledging challenge while still recognizing support, lessons, or meaning. This balanced perspective stabilizes emotions and supports wise decision-making under pressure. Relationships are transformed through gratitude. When appreciation is expressed, trust deepens and conflict softens. People feel seen not only for what they do, but for who they are. Gratitude shifts relationships from transactional to relational. It reduces entitlement and increases empathy. Even difficult relationships improve when one party chooses appreciation over constant evaluation. This does not excuse harmful behavior. It strengthens boundaries by grounding them in respect rather than resentment. Gratitude also anchors identity. When you recognize what you've been entrusted with, time, abilities, relationships, opportunities, you begin to see life as stewardship rather than entitlement. This perspective invites responsibility and care. You become less likely to waste energy on comparison because gratitude affirms that your path, though different, is valid and meaningful. Comparison fades when appreciation grows. In practice, gratitude is built through repetition, not mood. Waiting to feel grateful ensures inconsistency. Choosing gratitude trains the mind regardless of circumstances. Simple practices, reflecting daily on what supported you, acknowledging effort rather than outcome, appreciating growth even when results are incomplete, compound over time. These practices gradually reshape emotional baseline, making calm and clarity more accessible. Gratitude does not make life easier, but it makes it richer. It widens to a lens through which you see yourself and the world. As gratitude becomes habitual, it creates a quiet strength, a steady inner abundance that does not depend on external validation or perfect conditions. Service to something greater than yourself is the doorway to lasting fulfillment. Achievement alone can satisfy the ego for a moment, but it cannot sustain the soul. When life is centered only on personal gain, success eventually feels hollow, no matter how impressive it looks from the outside. True fulfillment emerges when your effort contributes to a cause, a community, or a future that extends beyond your own immediate needs. Human beings are wired for meaning, and meaning is most often discovered through contribution. When your work, time, or attention helps others grow, heal, or move forward, your own struggles gain context. Service shifts focus outward, reducing the constant self-evaluation that fuels anxiety and dissatisfaction. You stop asking, "Am I enough?" and start asking, "How can I help?" That shift alone relieves an enormous amount of internal pressure. Service also refines character. When you commit to something larger than yourself, Your personal moods no longer dictate your actions. You show up because others are counting on you, not because you feel inspired. This builds discipline rooted in responsibility rather than motivation. Over time, this discipline strengthens self-respect. You begin to trust yourself because you see evidence of reliability, even when conditions are imperfect. There is a quiet confidence that grows through service. It does not come from applause or recognition, but from knowing that your actions matter. This confidence is stable because it is not dependent on external validation. Even when efforts go unnoticed, the internal alignment between values and behavior creates peace. You are no longer chasing significance, you are living it. Service also expands perspective. Personal problems feel smaller when placed within a larger mission. This does not diminish your pain, but it prevents it from becoming your entire identity. When you see yourself as part of something unfolding beyond your own timeline, setbacks become less personal and more instructional. You begin to understand that your role is to contribute faithfully, not to control outcomes. Leadership naturally emerges from service. The most trusted leaders are not those who seek power, but those who carry responsibility with humility. Service-based leadership creates safety. People sense when they are valued as individuals rather than used as means to an end. This trust fosters collaboration, loyalty, and shared purpose. Influence earned through service lasts longer than authority demanded through position. Service also cultivates gratitude and empathy. When you engage with the needs of others, entitlement fades. You become more aware of interdependence, the ways lives are interconnected and supported. This awareness softens judgment and strengthens compassion. You begin to listen more deeply, respond more thoughtfully, and act with greater patience. There is a spiritual dimension to service that transcends results. When you serve with sincerity, you align with a principle older than ambition, that life finds meaning through giving. This alignment often brings a sense of guidance and clarity that cannot be forced. Opportunities appear, resilience deepens, and strength emerges in moments where logic alone would falter. Service does not require grand gestures. It is expressed in consistency, presence, and care. It lives in doing your work well, supporting others quietly, and acting with integrity when no one is watching. Over time, these small acts accumulate into a life that feels grounded and significant. When your life is oriented towards something greater than yourself, fulfillment becomes a byproduct rather than a pursuit. You stop asking what you can get from life and start asking what you can give to it. And in that exchange, you discover a depth of meaning that achievement alone can never provide. You said, "Give me whole speech conclusion and thank you and goodbye notes." ChatGPT said, you step back and look at everything you've just heard. Remember this. Transformati bar. On is not a single moment of inspiration. It is a daily practice of alignment. The words you speak to yourself, the purpose you commit to, the responsibility you accept, the consistency you choose, the fear you walk through, the gratitude you practice, and the service you offer. These are not separate ideas. They are a way of living. Every day, life will test these principles. Some days you will feel strong, other days uncertain. What matters is not perfection, but persistence. When you fall, return to responsibility. When you feel lost, return to purpose. When motivation fades, return to consistency. When fear appears, recognize it as growth calling you forward. When frustration rises, ground yourself in gratitude. And when success comes, anchor it in service so it remains meaningful. You are not here by accident, and your life is not random. Each day you are given a choice, to react or to lead, to drift or to decide, to live small or to live with intention. The quality of your future will always reflect the standards you practice today. Speak to yourself with truth, act with courage, serve with humility. Trust that small, faithful actions compound into extraordinary impact. Carry these reminders with you, not just as thoughts, but as commitments. Let them shape your mornings, guide your decisions, and steady you in difficult moments. When you live this way, progress becomes inevitable, character becomes visible, and fulfillment becomes real. Thank you for giving your time, your attention, and your openness to growth. Goodbye, and move forward with clarity, purpose, and strength.